We all remember the emotional events at Marineford, but what if someone had stepped in at the crucial moment? Imagine if Rayleigh had been there. How would the battle have changed? As the execution drew near, the world's attention turned to Marineford, where the Navy prepared for the battle to come. Whitebeard arrived with the full might of his crew, and the Marines tensed up, knowing they were about to face the man known as the strongest in the world. Ace's life hung in the balance, and Whitebeard would not let his adopted son be executed without a fight. As the two forces clashed, the war erupted in full force. The battle reached its peak as Ace was freed from his shackles, his flames roaring back to life. But the moment was fleeting. Sakazuki was hell-bent on ending Ace's life and provoked him by berating his adopted father. Enraged, Ace tried to retaliate with his fists, but the difference in power between his fire and Sakazuki's magma was simply too great. The Admiral overpowered Ace before lunging forward with his magma-coated fists, aiming for Luffy. Ace, driven by the instinct to protect his brother, stepped in front of the attack. Death was all but certain. And then came a flash of silver. Silence swept through the battlefield as a swift force intercepted Sakazuki's strike. A blade shimmered under the sky before clashing against the Admiral's burning fist. The impact sent shockwaves across the island, and Sakazuki came face to face with the Dark King, Silver's Rayleigh. Rayleigh sent the Admiral hurtling back, and Whitebeard, enraged by Sakazuki's actions, slammed his face into the ground with the massive power of his Gura Gura no Mi. The legendary former right hand of Gold D. Roger had arrived just in time. His piercing gaze swept over the battlefield like an emperor surveying his kingdom. His mere presence shifted the tides. Sakazuki, one of the Navy's most formidable forces, struggled to rise from the brutal counterattack, his body near collapse. The Marines watched in stunned silence as Rayleigh stood beside Whitebeard, the old legend standing shoulder to shoulder once more. The world trembled as the two unleashed their conqueror's haki in unison. The sheer force of their willpower sent an invisible storm across Marineford, knocking out countless Marines and pirates alike. The ground cracked, warships swayed, and for the first time, true fear gripped even the strongest of the Navy. Even Sengoku, ever composed, hesitated. The battlefield fell silent. Rayleigh's voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the silence. He declared the war over, giving the Marines a choice: stand down or face a battle against him. His words carried the weight of history itself. Kuzan and Kizaru, standing before the two legends, did not move to attack. Even they understood the gravity of the situation. Sengoku, fists clenched, struggled with the decision. Backing down meant humiliation, but pressing forward could spell disaster. As tension reached its peak, the war found its final turning point. A new ship arrived, cutting through the waves, and a figure stepped onto the battlefield. Shanks, the Emperor of the Sea, had come. With the arrival of these two figures, the Marines withdrew as Sengoku proclaimed a ceasefire, knowing they were in no condition to take on the might of two emperors and the right hand of the former pirate king. Aboard the battered yet still standing Moby Dick, amidst the wreckage of the greatest battle the world had seen in years, Ace sat before Whitebeard, Shanks, and Rayleigh. The weight of Marineford, of nearly losing everything, pressed down on him. His hands clenched into fists as he raised his head and turned toward Rayleigh. Ace admitted that he needed to be stronger, that his weakness had put the people he cared about in danger. He turned to Rayleigh and pleaded with him to train him and make him stronger. Rayleigh studied him for a moment, his sharp eyes assessing the desperation and determination in Ace's expression. He then turned his gaze to Luffy, who despite his exhaustion, seemed eager. A smirk tugged at the old man's lips before he gave a single nod and told both brothers to come with him. Whitebeard, injured yet firm, approved Ace's decision and told him not to worry about his old man since he was still alive and kicking. After giving his adopted father a hug, Ace left with Luffy and Rayleigh for the island of Rusakaina. It was the perfect training ground, a place where only the strongest could survive. From the moment they set foot on the island, Rayleigh wasted no time. His training was relentless, pushing Ace and Luffy to their absolute limits. He started by refining their basics: combat efficiency, endurance, and reaction speed, before advancing to more specialized techniques. Luffy, already possessing raw power and instinct, was drilled extensively in haki. Rayleigh made him master observation haki by blindfolding him and forcing him to fight against the island's beasts. Armament haki was trained through brutal battles, striking against Rayleigh's own hardened blows until Luffy could counter them with equal force. But the real challenge came with his conqueror's haki. Rayleigh forced him into extreme conditions, pitting him against waves of powerful animals until his will alone could subdue them. Ace, however, took a different path. His flames had always been powerful, but he lacked the precision and depth of control needed to reach his full potential. Rayleigh honed Ace's instincts, making him fight with his fire suppressed until he could hold his own in pure hand-to-hand combat. Only when Ace learned discipline did Rayleigh allow him to unleash his devil fruit abilities. For months, Ace battled against the elements, against the beasts, and against himself. The training pushed him further than he had ever imagined, forcing him to tap into reserves of power he never knew he had. His flames grew hotter, burning away his previous limits. At first, they turned a deeper orange, then a dark crimson, until finally something within him changed. One night, during an intense training session, Ace stood in the heart of a burning battlefield, his exhaustion threatening to consume him. But instead of faltering, something clicked. The fire inside him raged with newfound intensity, and in an instant, his flames shifted. The orange glow faded into a brilliant, otherworldly blue. The air around him ignited from sheer heat, distorting and warping as though reality itself was bending in the wake of his power. Rayleigh watched in silent approval, shielding himself from the scorching heat as Ace's flames crackled like a living entity. The ground beneath him blackened, trees turned to ash before they could even fully burn, and even the beasts that once roamed Rusukena kept their distance, sensing that something terrifying had awakened. Ace had achieved what few Logia users ever did. He had awakened his devil fruit. Now, his fire no longer simply burned, it consumed. His blue flames could eat through metal, vaporize stone, and burn without fuel, sustained only by his will. Even Rayleigh, with all his experience, admitted he had never seen fire quite like Ace's before. As their training came to an end, both brothers stood stronger than ever, ready to carve their own paths forward. Ace returned to the Whitebeard pirates, while Luffy continued his own journey, setting sail once more in pursuit of his dreams. Upon returning to the Whitebeard pirates, Ace met with his adoptive father, but it was a bittersweet sight. The world's strongest man had survived the war at Marineford, but he was clearly no longer the force of nature he once was. Though he had healed over the past 2 years, the scars remained. He was old and already sick, and he had sustained numerous injuries over the course of his life. He was no longer in ideal condition to lead the fight against the growing threats in the New World. Blackbeard, now a rising menace, had been steadily expanding his influence, laying claim to former Whitebeard territories. Without their captain at full strength, the Whitebeard pirates struggled to push back against his forces. Blackbeard's crew, composed of powerful criminals freed from Impel Down, proved to be relentless, launching attacks on their allies and strongholds. Seeing his family struggle, Ace refused to sit idly by. With his awakened devil fruit, Ace was now the strongest fighter in the crew, surpassing even the likes of Marco. He led a full-scale offensive against Blackbeard's forces, pushing them back from Whitebeard's territories. His mastery of haki, coupled with his newly awakened devil fruit abilities, made him a nightmare on the battlefield. No longer just a man of fire, Ace's blue flames burned with such intensity that none of the lower-ranked members of Blackbeard's crew could stand against him. The entire crew rallied behind Ace's strength, reclaiming the land they had lost to Blackbeard. It was an intense struggle, but Ace led the charges and skirmishes with unmatched skill and determination. Meanwhile, Luffy continued his adventure just as in the original timeline, sailing through the Grand Line with the rest of the Straw Hats. During his journey, he reunited with his long-lost brother Sabo in the Dressrosa Kingdom. Their reunion was deeply emotional, as Luffy, who had believed Sabo to be dead for years, struggled to hold back his tears. Sabo, now the second in command of the Revolutionary Army, embraced Luffy like a true brother. He had spent years fighting against the corrupt rule of the Celestial Dragons, but seeing Luffy again reminded him of the bond they shared as children. Sabo asked Luffy about Ace and explained how he had lost his memories. Fortunately, he regained them after learning that Ace had escaped execution. Sabo then promised that the three of them would reunite again one day. Luffy's journey eventually led him to Wano, where he faced both Big Mom and Kaido. With an alliance of powerful allies, Luffy and the others finally defeated the two Emperors of the Sea. This victory was made possible by Luffy awakening his devil fruit, becoming the Sun God Nika. With Kaido's defeat, Luffy was officially recognized as one of the Emperors of the Sea, acknowledged as one of the strongest pirates in the world. At the same time, Ace had fully taken over the Whitebeard pirates. Whitebeard, though still revered, officially named Ace his successor, passing on the responsibility of leading the crew. No longer just the fiery 2nd Division commander, Ace became the new captain. The world had changed. Luffy had become an emperor, carving his own legend across the seas. Ace had succeeded Whitebeard, defending his father's legacy and leading the charge against Blackbeard, and the balance of power was more fragile than ever before. By this time, the struggle between the Blackbeard pirates and the Whitebeard pirates was at an all-time high, and the final battle was on the brink. This time, however, Ace had learned from his past mistake, and he wasn't going to take on Blackbeard alone. So he reached out to the only other person he could rely on, Luffy. Luffy accepted in a heartbeat, and the two crews joined together to form an alliance with one purpose: defeating Blackbeard and ending his reign. The war erupted on Blackbeard's stronghold as the Whitebeard pirates and the Straw Hats advanced. Led by Ace and Luffy, the clash was spectacular. The full might of both crews was astounding, and even Blackbeard's elites believed they might have bitten off more than they could chew. Luffy unleashed the full power of Gear 5, his form shifting and twisting like a god of chaos. Every movement sent shockwaves across the battlefield, his punches bending reality itself as he toyed with his enemies. With every strike, he overpowered Blackbeard's strongest men, tossing them aside like mere obstacles in his path. The Straw Hat crew, each now legendary in their own right, battled fiercely. Zoro clashed with Shiryu, their swords ringing through the island as two master swordsmen fought for supremacy. Sanji weaved through enemy lines with inhuman speed, his legs burning hotter than ever as he overwhelmed his foes. The rest of the crew fought with unmatched precision, cutting down Blackbeard's forces one by one. Meanwhile, Ace faced Blackbeard directly. The man who had betrayed Whitebeard stood before him, his darkness consuming everything in its path. But Ace was no longer the reckless young pirate he once was. He had learned from his last fight with Blackbeard. He put all the training Rayleigh had given him into action, wielding his power with absolute control, becoming a calm yet overwhelming force of nature. His fire burned blue, the heat so intense that the air around him seemed to warp, and even Blackbeard's darkness could not nullify his flames quickly enough. The battle between Ace and Blackbeard was sheer intensity. Fire clashed against darkness, their awakened abilities colliding with devastating force. Blackbeard, with his mastery over the Yami Yami no Mi attempted to pull Ace into his gravitational void, but Ace countered with a surge of blue flame so powerful that it incinerated the very space around him. His control over heat had reached such a level that even Blackbeard was sweating bullets. Soon, Luffy joined up with Ace as well, and Teach finally realized that this wasn't a fight he was going to come out of unscathed. The band of criminals he called a crew began disengaging and retreating as their morale started to crumble. Luffy and Ace combined their powers as a massive fist hurtled toward Blackbeard, surrounded by an all-encompassing blue flame. The impact shattered the battlefield, engulfing Blackbeard in a maelstrom of fire and raw force. The pirate lay there unconscious as the two brothers and their crews rejoiced. The era of Teach was over. After the fall of Blackbeard, Luffy returned to his journey, setting his sights on uncovering the mysteries of the world. His path eventually led him to Egghead, where he found himself facing off against the five elders. The battle was unlike anything he had encountered before. Each of them possessed unfathomable power, wielding abilities that defied logic. Though he fought valiantly, their strength and immortality made it clear that this was not a fight that could be won in a single encounter. With a hint of luck and some help from the past, Luffy and his crew barely managed to flee the island. After Egghead, the journey took him to Elbaf, the island of giants, a place filled with history and legends. It was here that Luffy came face to face with Scopper, a legendary former member of the Roger Pirates. Wielding dual axes with unparalleled skill, Scopper sought to test Luffy's worth, challenging him to a battle for the key to Loki's shackles. Their fight was a true clash of titans. Luffy's fluid, unpredictable movements and gear, Five met with Scopper's relentless axe swings, each strike threatening to split the air itself. The battle raged on, neither fighter giving an inch, pushing each other to the brink. But before a victor could be decided, exhaustion set in, and both stood panting, acknowledging the other's strength in the silence of the battlefield. Impressed, Scopper handed Luffy the key. Loki had been imprisoned due to the havoc he had wreaked on Elbaf, despite being a prince, and he was imprisoned by none other than Shanks. Luffy went to Loki when word reached him that Sabo had been captured. During a daring operation on Mary Joaz, the revolutionaries had engaged in skirmishes against the celestial dragons and their forces. Amid the chaos, Sabo had been taken, and now he was held captive in the heart of the enemy's domain. Loki saw this as an opportunity. He told Luffy that he could help in raiding Mary Joaz as long as Luffy would let him fight against Figureland's Shamrock, the god's knight who had defeated him. Luffy agreed instantly and set out to meet with Ace. Ace was in the midst of dealing with his territories when Luffy arrived and told him everything, mainly the fact that Sabo was still alive. Ace was flooded with a mix of emotions that ultimately resulted in his flames sparking from the anger of learning that his brother had been captured. Without hesitation, the two brothers prepared to set sail for Mary Joaz with unshakable determination. They would set fire to the world if it meant they could free their brother. As they moved toward Mary Joaz, they were approached by none other than Monkey D. Dragon, Luffy's father. The revolutionary army was on its way to war, and after learning that two emperors were on the move, it seemed like the ideal opportunity for an alliance. Dragon was a man who had waged war against the world government for years, and he would not take Sabo's capture lying down. The largest war in history was about to unfold, as Luffy, Ace, and the combined forces of the Straw Hat Pirates, the Whitebeard Pirates, the Revolutionary Army, and an army of giants set sail toward Mary Joaz. The world held its breath. On the way, the entirety of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet joined up with Luffy as well. One by one, soldiers from all the races Luffy had helped gather. Warriors from Wano, the Mink tribe, the merfolk of Fishman Island, and countless others who had been touched by Luffy's actions rallied to his side. This was more than just a battle for Sabo. It was the final war against the tyrannical rule of the world government. Upon reaching the Red Line, the forces split into multiple battlefronts, with the giants using their monstrous strength to break through the defenses of the Holy Land. But they were met with overwhelming resistance. The Marines had deployed their entire might. Fleet Admiral Sakazuki stood at the front lines alongside Admirals Kizaru, Fujitora, and Aramaki, while the strongest vice admirals and commanders bolstered their forces. The Seraphim, the world government's ultimate weapons, were unleashed, their near-invincible bodies wreaking havoc among the attacking forces. At the same time, the God's Knights, led by Figureland's Shamrock, emerged from the depths of Mary Joaz. Their strength was nothing short of monstrous. Each one wielded Conqueror's haki, shaking the battlefield with every clash. It was here that Loki, the freed prince of Elbaf, finally came face to face with Shamrock. Their battle was a sight to behold, a thunderous clash between a vengeful giant and a masterful warrior of the Figureland bloodline. Shamrock's skill with the sword was mind-blowing as Cerberus was unleashed on the prince. But Loki was fueled by pent-up rage over his fallen comrades at the hands of Shamrock, and he wasn't going down that easily. Meanwhile, Ace led the Whitebeard pirates against the Marine forces, his Mera no Mi setting the battlefield ablaze. His flames turned blue, burning hotter than ever before, scorching everything in his path, around him combusted, explosions erupting as he tore through the ranks of the Marines. He clashed with Admiral Aramaki, their battle setting the land aflame and causing destruction on an apocalyptic scale. Luffy, in his Gear 5 form, darted across the battlefield, taking down pacifistas and Marines alike with his overwhelming power. But as the battle raged on, a terrifying presence made itself known. The five elders emerged, each shifting into their mythical zone forms, their monstrous bodies towering over the battlefield. The emergence of the Elders meant that the tide of the battle could quickly shift, as these immortal beings possessed ancient power. But they weren't the only new entrants. Just as the battle seemed to reach its peak, a sudden shift in the tides occurred. A burst of Conqueror's haki enveloped the battlefield as Shanks himself arrived with his crew. His haki flooded the battlefield, knocking out thousands of Marines in an instant. Standing side by side with Luffy, he gazed toward the towering figures of the Elders, his eyes burning with resolve as he saw his father, Figureland Garling, among them. Luffy, Ace, Shanks, and their allies were set to take on the ultimate enemy. The final battle of the greatest war in history had reached its most intense moment. The Holy Land of Mary Geoise was in ruins, with flames and debris scattered across the battlefield as the forces of the Revolutionary Army, the Straw Hat Pirates, the Whitebeard Pirates, the Giants of Elbaf, and countless allies clashed against the full might of the world government. The Red Line itself trembled as the sky turned black, split by the overwhelming Conqueror's haki unleashed by the world's strongest warriors. Amidst the chaos deep within Pangaea Castle, Sabo was held captive. Shanks told Ace and Luffy to go and rescue Sabo while his crew dealt with the Elders. The two brothers took Shanks at his word and, with their combined strength, fought their way through the remaining Marine forces, tearing through any who dared to stand in their way. Ace's flames melted steel and reduced entire fortifications to ash, while Luffy cartoonishly dismantled any enemy that came near them. They soon reached Sabo's prison, where Fleet Admiral Sakazuki was waiting. Sakazuki had come close to extinguishing Ace's life in the past, and now it was time for revenge. But this time, things were different. Fueled by rage and the desire to protect his family, Ace clashed with Sakazuki once again. Their battle shaking the entire castle. Fire and magma collided, the sheer heat distorting the air. But Ace was no longer the reckless hothead of the past. With his awakened Mera Mera no Mi, his fire burned so hot that it overpowered the Admiral's magma. In one decisive moment, Ace struck Sakazuki down, burning him with flames so intense that they melted even his Logia body. With Ace victorious, the two reached Sabo and broke his shackles. After years apart, the three brothers were finally back together, standing side by side. Ace and Sabo held back tears as Luffy embraced them. But there was no time to celebrate. A presence unlike any other loomed above them. Imu made their presence known to the three. This being, shrouded in a dark veil, stood like an ancient force of nature. Their mere presence sent chills down Ace's spine. Meanwhile, Shanks and his crew were taking on the Elders along with the rest of the brothers' allies. Suddenly, Imu launched an attack that tore through the castle, ripping through its walls and reaching the outside. The three barely managed to dodge the sudden assault. A being beyond human comprehension, Imu's true form was an abomination of godlike power, a writhing mass of darkness and divine energy that consumed everything around it. With a mere wave of their hand, entire portions of Mary Geoise were erased from existence. Imu's voice echoed through the battlefield, distorted and ancient, a whisper that carried the weight of centuries of control. Luffy, Ace, and Sabo stood together, ready to face the final enemy. The battle that followed was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Imu's power defied logic, warping reality itself as they attacked. Luffy, in Gear 5, fought with pure instinct, his form bending and twisting in ways that defied physics. Ace's blue flames clashed against the void-like energy of Imu. Sabo, though weakened from imprisonment, acted as a distraction, striking with devastating force, every move fueled by his will to destroy the ultimate tyrant. But Nika himself seemed to be competing with the tyrannical ruler. Then suddenly, Imu had had enough. They called forth power toward them, and the Elders began turning into husks. Their energy was flooding into the tyrant, and suddenly everything calmed down. But it was only the calm before the storm. The three brothers retreated as Shanks and the rest of the strongest warriors, including Zoro and Sanji, moved toward Imu. Imu's form, once vaguely humanoid, twisted and expanded into a monstrous, divine abomination. Shadows writhed like living serpents around them, dark tendrils stretching across the battlefield, swallowing the light itself. Their elongated body pulsed with ancient energy, and with a mere movement of their hand, an unimaginable force sent a devastating shockwave outward. Entire sections of Pangaea Castle collapsed, and countless warriors, even some of the strongest, were sent flying. Beings like Shanks and Dragon lunged at Imu, but even they were pushed back and tossed around like ragdoll. One after another, the alliance began to crumble, and the ancient being before them seemed insurmountable. The battlefield turned into a storm of destruction, the heavens themselves splitting apart as the final clash unfolded. But Luffy couldn't watch his allies fall. Something shifted inside him, and suddenly there was light. A golden glow stretched out, filling the void, pushing back against the darkness itself. Luffy's form shimmered, his laughter carrying through the battlefield, his heartbeat pounding like the drums of liberation. His entire body radiated divine energy. His Gear 5 had evolved, surpassing even its previous limits. The Sun God had arrived. arrived. With a massive grin, Luffy grabbed hold of the very fabric of the void and pulled. The darkness cracked apart like fragile glass, shattered by sheer willpower. Imu, for the first time in history, took a step back. The Alliance felt it. The tides had turned. Luffy moved like lightning, his punches carrying the force of a god's will. He stretched and twisted through the battlefield, turning the very sky into a weapon. Imu screamed, lashing out in desperation, their form beginning to break apart. The void around them cracked, their control over reality slipping. The world was rejecting them. With one final attack, Luffy expanded his fist, making it larger than even Pangaea Castle itself, his entire body crackling with divine energy. The sun shone behind him through the broken clouds as he unleashed his final blow, the final dawn. Imu, the eternal ruler, was consumed by the impact. The darkness shattered, the sky split, the world itself trembled. Then silence. As the dust settled, Imu was no more. The throne of the world lay empty. The final war was over, and the world was free. Make sure to subscribe for more One Piece videos.